Good evening, I'm David Charnes. Tonight, a one-on-one interview with the man in charge of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Sheriff Kevin McMahill. We talked about several issues impacting our community, the rise in DUIs and crashes, recent high-profile events, but most importantly, we talked about accountability and solutions. How do you measure success?
How do I measure success? Well, in my business, probably the number one thing that we look at is crime reduction and how well we're doing against crime. There's a lot more factors than that, however, but I think that's probably the single biggest barometer of success that the public looks at from their police department. You know, we had another wildly successful year against crime, down 20% in murders again. When you get down, extrapolating all the way through the numbers, we ended up with 107 homicides last year. That's the lowest number in a very long time. We're down about 15% in robbery again, and finally made some headway on one of the numbers that wasn't so good for us, which was auto theft last year. This year we went down about 30%. So all of our crime category numbers went down this year. Another hugely successful year for that. I will tell you though, David, another area that's really important to me is when I look at the health and welfare of my people. As you well know, one of the things that I did was talk about taking care of the heart, mind, body, and soul of my police officers and really all first responders as we continue to move this forward. And, you know, we went last year without a single suicide, which is the first time that's happened in quite a long time. That includes retirees in that. And I know that what this job does to my people affects them greatly. And so the creation of that wellness bureau and the hiring of the clinicians and we had 425 visits in the last month by our members of our organization to see those clinicians to deal with all the challenges that come with doing this line of work.
We have a DUI problem in this town.
A big one.
How can we make these numbers go the other way?
The most egregious thing to me by far is there's no accountability when we catch them. That's the truth. And, you know, when you have people, 3 DUIs is supposed to be a felony, right? We have people 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 DUIs. This has gotten even more personal to me because, as you well know, my officer Pulsifer just died because of a head-on crash from a DUI accident. I don't know how many times we can expect to arrest somebody, for them to go to court, and for nothing to happen to them, and expect that they're ever going to change their behavior. And that's something that we really need to look at. We need to look at the confluence, I think, of the legalization of marijuana and the mixing of marijuana and alcohol into individual drivers. Again, marijuana is another very difficult issue for us when it comes to driving. People don't feel the same way after they've smoked a little bit of weed versus had something to drink. And they certainly aren't really talking a whole lot about when you mix the two together. And we know that it has a dramatic impact on your ability to drive a vehicle. And so, you know, it's disappointing to me because the reality of it is that we have Uber and Lyft, and, you know, we all the time say, hey, just call your boss here. If you find yourself in a place you can't get it or you can't afford it, we'll come get you. And so I think until we actually change the way it is that we hold people accountable in the court systems, we're never going to change the behavior of drivers. It's just not going to happen.
Here in Nevada, DUI 1 is misdemeanor, DUI 2 is misdemeanor. You really don't get cooking until you get your felony. And sometimes that will get knocked down.
And it doesn't always get charged on DUI.
And it might not get charged, depending on where you are in your series.
Yep.
Because if you're a repeat DUI driver and 7 years goes by, you reset, which is how we get these stories about people with 9, 10, 11 DUIs. A consequence looks like what? 1 DUI, 2 days in jail, 1 DUI, a larger fine, because we do stories about people who have multiple DUIs, then they've gone through the coroner class. They've gone through the required, and they're still there in court on their new DUI. So what's a consequence?
Well, what I would say to you about that is first off, I don't think a day or 2 in jail is going to do anything to change behavior. But what I would say to you is that if in the world that we live in, if we acknowledge that alcoholism is an addiction, like so many of the other drugs that we already recognize as it is, then I really believe we should be focusing in on some intensive supervision, particularly early on. You see somebody that gets 1 or 2 DUIs, they've got an alcohol problem, period. And really, what does that look like to change their behavior from a prevention perspective to make sure they're not out doing it anymore? I don't think enough is paid attention to by the court systems to make sure that constant monitoring is going on of those individuals that have multiple offenses. And if we look at it from a holistic perspective, while the idea, and listen, here's where I come from on this. This is not a very popular thing, but you've heard me talk about this before. My jail is full of mentally ill, addicted, and homeless people. It really is. And that jail is also not fixing all of those things. We can't do it by ourselves. Now, we're partnered with lots of people outside of the police department to do that, and we will always continue to do that because I believe that's as effective as the incarceration. But at some point, and if it's maybe the 3rd DUI, then great. But there needs to be a real consequence, right?
Which is what?
Well, I would say at least a year in prison at that point. I mean, a minimum of a year in prison until you're able to even begin to think about getting to a place where we're going to help you.
And is it 3 DUIs in that sequence or 3 DUIs total?
Well, again, I don't make the laws. You're asking me as my personal opinion, but I think at the point where you get to 3 strikes, you're out. And I just don't know how many more chances you need to give somebody, particularly as you've been involved in this stuff for a while now. You know there's people out there with 5, 6, 7, and even more DUIs that haven't been held accountable.
Next, our conversation continues about consequences.
We haven't done anything to actually put some level of accountability into the court system. We just haven't.
What the sheriff says about that accountability, and could speed cameras and changes to state law curb death on our roads? And then later, a bomb explodes near the Strip. An officer shoots and kills a 911 caller. The 2 major incidents that rocked our community and how the sheriff is now reacting to them. You're watching Metro Police and Priorities, our conversation with Sheriff Kevin McMahill.